Does she even understand us? She's just a waitress. The billionaire CEO smirked as he leaned closer to his guest, whispering in flawless Arabic. Certain, the young black waitress standing before them had no clue what he just said. But then, the entire room froze, because the girl turned her head slowly, fixed her calm, piercing eyes on him, and answered back, in the very same Arabic. Her tone was flawless, her pronunciation sharp, and her words cutting enough to slice through his arrogance like a knife. Ladies and gentlemen, what happened next left everyone in that room speechless. Before I take you back to where it all began, make sure to hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments, because trust me, you're going to want to talk about this one. Maya Jackson had never asked for much. She was 23, juggling 2 part-time jobs, and helping her mother pay rent on their tiny apartment. By day, she studied linguistics at a local community college. By night, she worked as a waitress at one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, a place where billionaires sealed deals over $5,000 bottles of wine, and where people like Maya were invisible. She was used to being overlooked. She was used to being underestimated. But she wasn't used to what happened that night. The restaurant was buzzing with chatter, chandeliers spilling golden light over polished mahogany tables, and at the center of it all sat Richard Davenport, one of the richest CEOs in the country, famous not only for his wealth, but for his arrogance. He was hosting Khalid Al-Farouq, a powerful Middle Eastern investor whose funds could make or break Richard's latest business venture. Maya had been assigned to their table. As she approached, balancing the tray carefully, Richard barely looked at her. He waved his hand dismissively, muttering, "Finally, took you long enough." She smiled politely, placing their glasses with practiced grace. But when Khalid greeted her warmly, Richard chuckled under his breath and switched to Arabic. "She's just a waitress. Pretty face, but I doubt she even understands the menu." The 2 men laughed. Or at least Richard laughed. Khalid didn't. His eyes flickered toward Maya with curiosity, and that was the moment. Maya straightened her back slowly, fixed her calm, piercing eyes on him, and answered back, in the very same Arabic. Her tone was flawless, her pronunciation sharp, and her words cutting enough to slice through his arrogance like a knife. To understand that moment, you have to know Maya's story. Her late father had been a diplomat. She'd grown up between embassies, moving from one country to another, learning languages as easily as some children collected toys. Arabic, French, Spanish, Mandarin, she soaked them all in. But when her father died suddenly, Maya and her mother lost everything. No inheritance, no safety net, just bills, grief, and the cold reality of survival. So yes, Maya served tables, but her mind was razor sharp, fluent in cultures and tongues most CEOs could only dream of navigating. And on that night, it was about to make all the difference. The sentence left the air like a thrown gauntlet. Maya Jackson's Arabic answer, calm and precise, cut through the din. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to 3 faces at that one table: Richard Davenport's reddening pride, Khalid Al-Farouq's steady watchfulness, and Maya's composed gaze. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Richard's fingers, still wrapped around his wineglass, trembled. He was used to controlling rooms, to being the center that pulled every orbit into place. Tonight, he had tried to mock, to reclaim that center. Instead, he revealed a blindness he'd spent decades hiding. Khalid did not laugh. He tilted his head, curiosity sharpening his eyes. "He speak Arabic?" he asked in a quiet voice that echoed louder than any raised voice could have. Maya's answer was simple. "I grew up with it. My father taught me." I speak it well enough to judge when a proposal is respectful and when it is not. The investors around the table exchanged small, automatic glances, some surprised, some annoyed, most calculating. A deal the size of the one on Richard's table depended on trust, nuance, and cultural respect. A careless word could undo months of negotiation, and Richard had been careless. Khalid set his glass down, deliberate. "Mr. Davenport," he said, looking straight at the CEO, "I'd like to hear from Ms. Jackson. Tell me what you heard and what it means for the agreement." Richard's attempt at a scoff came out brittle. "You can't possibly think—" he started, then swallowed. He had no real answer. His smirk, that shield of arrogance, was already flaking off. Maya inhaled, steady as the tide. She explained, in Arabic, not only the insult he had mouthed under his breath, but the deeper error in his pitch. A proposed clause that, translated literally, read as a demand rather than a mutual term. A technical example that would come off as patronizing, or a timeline that ignored regional business rhythms and risk-sharing expectations. She pointed out 3 specific lines in the draft he'd pushed forward earlier, lines that an offhand English phrasing had masked, but which, in Arabic context, signaled contempt for Khalid's partners. As she spoke, Khalid's posture softened and then hardened into something else: respect. He nodded, not once, but several times, absorbing the technical nuances she laid out and the cultural missteps that would poison any agreement. His advisor made furtive notes. Richard's associates went pale. The CEO's inelegant attempt to charm had been exposed as ignorance and disrespect. When Maya finished, the room was very, very quiet. Khalid's hand rested on the paper before him. He looked at Richard and then to the rest of the table. "This is a grave mistake," he said slowly. "A partner who does not understand the language or the customs is not a partner. I cannot proceed under these terms tonight." The words hit like a gavel. Richard leapt to his feet, voice sharp and defensive. "You can't cancel. This is the last stage. We have commitments." Khalid raised one palm. "I have been negotiating for months. I respect the process. Respect must be mutual. I will not sign when the tone of this agreement is one of domination, not cooperation." Cameras on unseen phones, someone always records now, flickered, and whispers swelled into an audible murmur. The rich room that had been leaning in to watch a business victory now watched Richard drain of color. Then, quietly, as the hum of the restaurant reawakened, Khalid turned to Maya. "May I have your contact information? Someone who can read meaning where others can't. Someone who thinks in both worlds. That person is rare." Maya's palms were damp. Her life had been late buses, second shifts, and textbooks read under a single lamp. "Sir," she said, voice catching, "I'm only a student. I don't—" "Good," Khalid smiled. But there was no condescension in it. "You are exactly the kind of person I need. If you are willing, I'd like you to consult with my team. There are places where your skill is not only needed, it will be rewarded." A murmur of astonishment rose. Richard's mouth opened, closed, opened again. For a CEO who built empires on perception, every second of being overtaken on stage cut harder than any fine-tuned rebuttal. As Khalid stood, he extended his hand to Maya with the casual authority of a man who could change lives with the tilt of his decision. "Think on it. We leave tomorrow morning." Richard's fury turned hot enough to be visible. He hissed, "You'll regret this." To the room, to Maya, it was hard to tell. The words were small, the threat almost too late. Maya's pulse thundered.
An offer like this would mean possibility. Education paid for, real doors opening beyond the restaurant's swing. But it also meant walking into rooms where powers like Richard's would not forgive a loss. She folded Khalid's business card into the palm of her hand like a talisman. As the investors gathered themselves and the chairs scraped, camera still recording the drama, the rumor mill picked up speed. By the time Maya clocked out that night, texts of congratulations and offers cascaded her phone. Social media had already caught fragments of the
Richard Davenport's boardroom had never been this tense. Word of Khalid Al-Farouq's reaction at the gala had spread like wildfire. Investors were whispering, employees were uneasy, and for the first time in decades, the billionaire CEO looked shaken. But Richard wasn't ready to admit defeat. Not to Khalid, not to his investors, and especially not to Maya Jackson. The next morning, as the sun poured its golden light across the city skyline, Maya sat nervously in her small apartment, staring at the folded piece of paper in her hand. It was an invitation, but not just any invitation. It was a summons to the Davenport International headquarters. Her heart raced. Why would Richard Davenport, the man who mocked me, suddenly want to see me? She looked down at her work uniform, still neatly pressed from the night before. 1,000 thoughts spun in her mind, but one thing was certain. She wasn't going to run away. Inside the towering glass building, Richard paced back and forth like a caged animal. His arrogance was still there, but beneath it, cracks were forming. Richard slammed his fist on the polished conference table. "Do you realize what she did, Khalid? She humiliated me in front of everyone. She twisted my own weapon against me." But Khalid didn't flinch. The Arab investor leaned back calmly in his chair, his eyes cold and calculating. "No, Richard, she didn't humiliate you. You exposed yourself." Richard froze. The words cut deeper than he expected. And just as his anger boiled over, the glass doors opened. Maya Jackson stepped inside. Her presence, though modest, carried a quiet strength. She clutched her invitation in one hand, her eyes scanning the opulent room filled with men who had underestimated her. Richard smirked, trying to reclaim control. "Well, well, if it isn't the waitress who thinks she's a linguist. Do you know why you're here, Maya?" Maya's voice was steady, though her pulse raced. "I'm here because you don't know how to admit when you're wrong." The room fell silent. Even Khalid tilted his head, intrigued. Richard leaned forward, sneering. "You think one clever trick makes you powerful? You're nothing but—" But before he could finish, Khalid interrupted sharply. "Enough, Richard." All eyes turned to Khalid. His tone carried the authority of a man used to commanding empires. "Maya Jackson has what you lack: humility, intelligence, and dignity. She didn't just speak Arabic last night. She spoke truth." Richard's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being spoken to this way, especially not in front of her. Maya held his gaze, and in that moment she realized something. Richard Davenport wasn't invincible. He was just a man terrified of losing his throne. But just as Maya began to feel a glimmer of victory, something unexpected happened. Richard straightened, his smirk returning. "Fine," he said coldly. "If she's so talented, let's put her to the test. Right here, right now." Khalid raised a brow. "What are you suggesting?" Richard's eyes gleamed with malice. "I'll give her a challenge, something only the sharpest minds can solve. If she fails, this little fairy tale ends, and she'll crawl back to her diner where she belongs." Maya's stomach tightened. She hadn't asked for any of this, but walking away wasn't an option. Not anymore. Khalid looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Do you accept, Maya?" Her hands trembled, but her voice was firm. "Yes, I accept." And so, the stage was set. The billionaire CEO, desperate to restore his pride, against the young waitress who had nothing but her wits and courage. It was no longer about language,
no longer about humiliation. This was about justice and survival. But what Richard didn't know was that Maya Jackson carried something far greater than he could ever imagine, a secret that could bring his entire empire crumbling down. What do you think, viewers? Was Richard smart to challenge Maya, or has he just signed his own downfall? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe.
The air in the Davenport boardroom was thick with tension. Every executive, every assistant, even Khalid Al-Farouq himself leaned forward as Richard Davenport crossed his arms smugly. "Maya Jackson," he said, his voice echoing with arrogance, "if you want to prove you belong here, then solve this, right now." He slid a sleek black folder across the table. Maya opened it, her hands steady despite the hammering of her heart. Inside were financial statements, projections, and international trade contracts written in multiple languages: English, French, Arabic, even Mandarin. Richard smirked. "Translate, analyze, and tell me what's wrong with this deal. If you're as smart as Khalid thinks, it should be easy." Maya scanned the documents, her eyes darting across the numbers and the languages. For a moment, doubt threatened to drown her. This wasn't just about pride anymore. This was about her future. Richard leaned back, whispering loud enough for everyone to hear. "She's just a waitress. Watch her stumble." But then, Maya's lips curled into the faintest smile. She looked up, meeting Khalid's curious gaze. "There's a clause hidden in the Arabic section," she said calmly, pointing at the page. "It changes the entire meaning of the contract. It looks like a partnership, but in truth, it strips Davenport International of its controlling rights after 5 years. Someone tried to bury it under translation errors." The room erupted in gasps. Khalid's eyes widened, not in disbelief, but in respect. "She's correct," he said gravely. "Richard, if this had been signed, your empire would have been stolen from under you. By your own arrogance, you nearly destroyed yourself." Richard's face drained of color. For the first time, the billionaire CEO was speechless. Maya straightened her shoulders. "You mocked me for being a waitress. But the truth is, I've been studying languages and business for years, in between shifts. Every coffee I served, every table I cleaned, I was preparing for more. And now I see, the only difference between you and me, Mr. Davenport, is opportunity." The boardroom fell silent. The executives, once loyal to Richard, now looked at him with doubt. The great Richard Davenport, outsmarted by the very person he tried to humiliate. But just as victory seemed sweet, Richard slammed his hands on the table. "This means nothing," he barked, desperation bleeding into his tone. "You think this little stunt changes who you are? You're still nobody." Khalid stood, his voice calm but thunderous. "No, Richard, she's somebody now. Somebody you should fear, because she represents the one thing you've forgotten, that greatness can come from anywhere." Richard's fists clenched, his empire, his reputation, his pride, all slipping through his fingers, and for the first time in his life, he looked small. But what Richard didn't realize was that Maya's journey was only just beginning. Her discovery of the contract would ripple far beyond this boardroom. Investors were already whispering. Journalists were digging into Davenport International's scandals. And Khalid, he wasn't just impressed. He was interested. Very interested. As Maya left the towering glass building clutching same paper that once mocked her, she knew one thing for certain. Her life had changed forever. Viewers, what do you think? Has Maya finally defeated Richard, or is this only the beginning of a darker battle ahead? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell us if you want us to drop the part 2 of this story, and don't forget to subscribe.